Imagine a single speech just 3 minutes long that not only shook the halls of the US Capitol but crossed oceans, reaching a president thousands of miles away in Africa. What happened next? It sparked a global movement for justice that changed lives and connected continents. But what was it about this speech that made a powerful leader drop everything and take action? Stay tuned, because this story will leave you in awe. Dear friends, what you're about to hear is more than just a story. It's a glimpse into a world where quiet courage reshapes destinies and dignity outshines power. These are the voices often missed by the headlines, but not here. If this kind of storytelling moves you, if it stays with you long after the screen fades, we invite you to subscribe and ring the bell. And before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. We read every word. Now let's begin. In the halls of the US Capitol, where power and politics are often defined by polished speeches and well-rehearsed rhetoric, there came a moment when everything changed. It wasn't the kind of moment the media predicted, nor was it born from a grand political agenda. It started with a simple 3-minute speech delivered by a woman who refused to be silenced. A Texas congresswoman, standing tall in the face of injustice, spoke not just for the voiceless, but for every person who had ever been ignored, marginalized, or oppressed. Her words, sharp, honest, and unwavering, were not just a commentary on racial injustice. They were a call to action. And within 72 hours, that speech had crossed oceans, a wave of truth that reached all the way to the heart of Africa. But why did her words resonate so deeply, and why did they travel so far, when many similar speeches had been forgotten in the echo of Washington's halls? The answer lies in the raw authenticity of the moment. Jasmine Crockett, the congresswoman from Texas, didn't just speak as a politician. She spoke as a human being who had lived the very injustices she condemned. She didn't need a stage, a title, or a political endorsement. Her voice alone, unfiltered and unapologetic, carried the weight of generations of pain, struggle, and hope. What no one expected was that those words, which had shaken the foundation of the Capitol, would find their way into the hands of a leader thousands of miles away. Ibrahim Traoré'S, the president of Burkina Faso, was not just watching a speech, he was witnessing a movement. Her words did something few others had ever done. They made him feel seen, understood, and awakened. He was no longer just a leader of a country. He became a man stirred by truth, a man ready to act, to respond, to connect with a voice that transcended borders, politics, and race. This wasn't about politics, it was about history in the making, a history that was beginning to unfold in a way no one could have predicted. When one woman's voice, raw and powerful, reached across an ocean to touch the heart of an African president, it set the stage for a global awakening, a journey that would change not just lives, but the course of history itself. What happened next would leave everyone in awe. In the heart of the US Capitol, a place where rhetoric often veers toward the political and the calculated, one woman stood ready to disrupt the usual order. Jasmine Crockett, a congresswoman from Texas, had no need for polished speeches or rehearsed sound bites. She was not there to appease, to entertain, or to charm. Her message was simple, yet seismic in its truth, a truth born from lived experience. As she approached the podium, the room fell into a hushed silence. Not because of her title or the weight of her position, but because of the strength that radiated from her, unspoken yet undeniable. Crockett's voice echoed in that chamber with a clarity and boldness that few have ever dared to achieve in such a space. She didn't stand there as a politician seeking votes or favor. No, she stood as a woman who had witnessed the devastating effects of injustice, a woman who had walked the difficult path of inequality and saw with her own eyes the pain of those who were left behind. This was not just a speech, this was a cry for justice, one that reached deep into the marrow of every person who listened. Her words were not sugar-coated, not designed to fit into the safe narratives of mainstream politics. She spoke of the generational weight of economic disparity, the kind that isn't just written in numbers, but in lives lost to poverty, in dreams deferred by systems built to fail. She called out the violence that thrived in silence, the kind that wasn't always visible, but lingered in the spaces where opportunity was denied. She didn't shout. She didn't raise her voice in anger. Instead, her words cut through the room like a scalpel, precise, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. As she spoke, there was no thunderous applause, no cheering crowds. Instead, a profound silence settled over the room, a silence that is rarely heard in the halls of power. It was the kind of silence that follows after truth is spoken, the kind that forces people to confront what they've chosen to overlook. Her speech didn't just challenge the political systems, it challenged the very people in that room to look into their own consciences and ask, what have we done to make the world better? Her message was clear. Justice was not a partisan issue, it was a human one. And in that single sentence, she laid bare everything that had been left unsaid for far too long. What Jasmine Crockett did in that moment was not simply deliver a speech, she started a movement. She called for a reckoning, not just in the halls of Congress, but in the hearts of those who heard her. As Jasmine Crockett's words reverberated across the chamber of the U.S. Capitol, their impact stretched far beyond the confines of Washington. Thousands of miles away, in a quiet corner of West Africa, President Ibrahim Traoré'S of Burkina Faso was watching, not as a politician, but as a man whose soul was stirred by the raw, unapologetic truth of her speech. In that moment, he wasn't just listening to a congressional address, he was hearing a voice that echoed his own experiences, struggles, and aspirations. Her words, though spoken in another part of the world, spoke directly to the heart of a leader whose own country was grappling with the same issues of injustice, inequality, and systemic oppression. Traoré sat in the stillness of his office, absorbed by the power of her message. This wasn't a moment of political calculation or diplomatic formality. This was something deeper. Jasmine Crockett's speech was a direct challenge to all the barriers that kept people like him, like his people, from achieving the dignity they deserved. In a way, her voice transcended national borders, revealing the shared human experience that links all those who have suffered under systems of inequality. The more he listened, the more he felt compelled to act, not out of obligation, but out of respect for the profound courage she had displayed. Unable to shake the weight of her words, Traoré instructed his staff to gather everything they could on this remarkable congresswoman from Texas. He knew that such a voice couldn't go unheard, especially in a world where so many were too often silenced. He ordered a handwritten letter, a gesture that to him carried more weight than any political statement could. The letter would not just acknowledge her courage, it would serve as a recognition of the shared struggle that connected their two countries, one in Africa and one in America. In his office, as the hours passed, Traoré reflected on the power of her words. He knew that in this moment history was unfolding, not because of the politics behind her speech, but because of the humanity it invoked. It was a call to all leaders around the world to remember that true justice had no borders, no nationality, no political affiliation. It was something universal, something that transcended race and geography. And in that moment, the president of Burkina Faso understood exactly what he had to do. He would respond not just to a speech, but to a voice that had touched him on a deeply personal level. The impact of Jasmine Crockett's words had reached far beyond Washington. It had reached into the heart of Africa, and it was a connection that would change everything. When Jasmine Crockett received the letter from President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, it wasn't just a piece of paper with formal words. It was a profound acknowledgement, a recognition that transcended borders and politics. In that moment, Jasmine realized something she had never truly expected. Her voice, her words, had reached someone across the globe in a way that could not be ignored. It wasn't about fame or recognition, it was about the deep, human connection that had been sparked by the truth she spoke. This was more than a diplomatic gesture. It was a gesture of solidarity, a reminder that justice and equality were not just American ideals, they were universal principles, and they resonated with leaders, communities, and individuals worldwide. As she held the letter in her hands, Jasmine felt a wave of emotion wash over her. For years, she had been fighting for the voiceless, the forgotten, and the oppressed. She had always believed in the power of speaking the truth, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it seemed like no one was listening. But here, in the quiet of her office, as she read words of respect and admiration from a man she had never met, something shifted within her. The weight of her work, the struggles she had faced, suddenly felt validated, not just by her constituents, but by the world. Her efforts had crossed the Atlantic, had pierced through the noise of global politics, and had found a kindred spirit in someone who understood the fight for justice at its core. This unexpected recognition was more than just a pat on the back. It was a signal of something much larger. Jasmine knew that her speech had struck a chord with President Traoré, but it was more than that. It was the beginning of a global conversation about justice, equality, and the shared humanity that binds us all. The world was starting to see that the fight for dignity, the fight for basic rights, was not confined to any one place. It was not an isolated battle, but a collective struggle that united people from every corner of the globe. For Jasmine, the letter from Ibrahim Traoré was a turning point. It was a powerful reminder that the words she had spoken in the capital, words that had at first seemed like a solitary cry in a crowded room, had indeed made a difference. They had sparked something much larger than herself, something that had the potential to change the course of history. The connection between her and the president was no longer just symbolic. It was the beginning of a shared movement, one that crossed continents, cultures, and borders, all united in the fight for justice. It was a moment that reaffirmed her belief in the power of truth, the power of speaking out, and most importantly, the power of being heard. The seeds of a global movement had been sown, and now it was time for them to take root. What began as a single speech spoken with unwavering courage by Jasmine Crockett had grown into something much greater than anyone could have predicted. The Bridges of Equality initiative was born from that very moment, an initiative that transcended borders, fueled by the idea that true justice and equality are not confined by nationality, race, or politics. Jasmine, once just a congresswoman from Texas, had now become the leader of a movement that united the world in a shared fight for dignity and human rights. The initiative was simple in its core mission: to connect communities across continents, offering support and resources for those most in need. It sought not just to provide aid, but to build lasting relationships, foster economic empowerment, and ensure that marginalized voices had a seat at the table. Jasmine's vision wasn't just about offering charity, it was about giving people the tools to empower themselves, to lift each other up, and to build a future where everyone could thrive. In the months that followed, the world began to take notice. The Bridges of Equality initiative spread like wildfire, from rural communities in Africa to underserved neighborhoods in South America and beyond. The mission was no longer confined to speeches or political rallies. It was taking root in the everyday lives of people who had long been forgotten by the systems that were supposed to support them. In Kenya, women were gaining the tools they needed to start their own businesses. In Brazil, children were given access to education that had once been out of reach. And in rural villages in Nepal, communities were coming together to build schools and healthcare centers with the help of the global network that had been established. The impact was undeniable. For Jasmine, the success of the initiative wasn't about the numbers or the headlines. It was about the lives that were being transformed. It was about the young girl in Kenya who, for the first time, saw a path to a future she had once thought impossible. It was about the women in Brazil who were now running businesses and sending their children to school. It was about the people in remote villages who, for the first time, had access to clean water and health care. Yet even as the initiative grew and flourished, Jasmine never forgot the moment that started it all. It wasn't the speeches, the media coverage, or the accolades that mattered most to her. It was the simple truth that her words had been heard, that the fight for justice had connected people from every corner of the globe, and in that connection a new world had begun to emerge, a world where the fight for equality wasn't just a political battle, it was a movement fueled by humanity, empathy, and the unwavering belief that we are all in this together. Jasmine Crockett's journey is one of transformation, courage, and unexpected connections that changed the world. What began as a brief, powerful speech in the US Capitol ignited a movement that transcended political lines, borders, and nationalities. Her words, raw and unapologetic, not only resonated deeply within the halls of Congress, but also reached across the globe, touching the heart of President Ibrahim Traoré'S of Burkina Faso. The letter he sent in response wasn't just a diplomatic gesture, it symbolized a profound human connection rooted in shared struggles for justice and equality. This moment sparked a movement, the Bridges of Equality, uniting people from different continents in the fight for dignity, empowerment, and human rights. The ripple effect of this movement has been nothing short of inspiring. It has transformed lives, sparked global conversations, and shown that when we speak with honesty and authenticity, we have the power to break down barriers. Jasmine's courage in speaking her truth gave others the strength to do the same, showing that leadership isn't about title or position, it's about standing up for what's right, regardless of the audience. Her story teaches us that change doesn't come from waiting for permission, but from acting with conviction and embracing the power of our words. Lesson to apply in daily life. The story of Jasmine Crockett encourages us all to recognize the power of our voice, no matter how small we may feel in the vastness of the world. In our daily lives, whether it's standing up against injustice, helping a community in need, or simply speaking out for what is right, our words and actions matter. The lesson here is clear. Never underestimate the impact of your truth. Speak up, act with courage, and watch how your small voice can create ripples of change. Quiz question. What was the main message of Jasmine Crockett's speech? A. Justice is a political issue. B. Justice is a human issue. Please comment your answer with either A or B. We'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions as well. Feel free to share your perspective in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support more inspiring content. Your support helps us create more meaningful stories that can spark change.